Hello, and welcome to the Infectious Disease Podcast from Clinical Care Options. I'm your host, Jennifer Blanchette. Today's episode is the second in a short series titled Steps to the Future, Present and Future of PrEP, featuring expert insights on recent and ongoing advances in HIV pre-exposure prophylaxis. During this episode, Dr. Nicholas Chamberlain from Atlanta, Georgia, provides an overview of the different antiretroviral drug formulations and dosing strategies that are in various stages of clinical development for long-acting HIV PrEP, advances that collectively offer the potential for highly individualized approaches to HIV biomedical prevention. For more information about Dr. Chamberlain and for a link to additional educational content from this program, including downloadable slides, please visit the show notes for this episode. Now let's get started and hear what Dr. Chamberlain has to say about the promise of individualized HIV prevention.
I'm Dr. Nick Chamberlain, Medical Director at AIDS Healthcare Foundation's Atlanta Midtown location in Atlanta, Georgia. And although I primarily focus on providing care to HIV-positive individuals, today I'll be talking about the present and future of pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP. This talk is part of a series of talks on PrEP with other presenters discussing what's currently available, identifying potential candidates for PrEP, when to use TDF versus TAF, as well as long-acting cabotegravir. So none of those topics will be the primary focus of my talk today. And what you'll see throughout today's talk is that there are a number of exciting new options on the horizon. But before I get into these options, I guess I first want to start by just talking about patient preference and why it's so important to consider when we think about developing HIV prevention strategies. So we know that PrEP is highly effective at reducing the risk of HIV infection when taken daily. But despite how effective PrEP appears to be, it really doesn't matter how well the medication works if people don't take it. Let's face it. So taking medications every day can be a particular challenge, especially if that medication is only being used for preventative measures, especially when we think about young and otherwise healthy individuals. The convenience of the regimen is extremely important, and it's a major contributor to adherence. So oftentimes you may hear patients say, I simply forgot, when they sort of give reasons as to why they missed the medications. Now, with that said, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Some individuals may have no problem taking the pill every day. Others might prefer taking PrEP in an event-driven or on-demand fashion. Some may not want to take a pill at all. Some may find the idea of going to a clinic every 3 months for HIV and STI screening to be excessive, while others would prefer a long-acting medication or which might allow for less frequent testing or clinic visits. Some people may prefer not going to a clinic at all, for instance, and instead do their testing at home and have their PrEP prescriptions mailed to them. At any rate, I think being able to provide people with options, whether it be new biomedical interventions or simply providing new ways to take advantage of current biomedical interventions, will increase the likelihood that individuals find a regimen that works for them. So they not only start the medication, but stay on the medication, particularly during moments in their lives when they're at risk of HIV infection. So from a publication by Green et al. In 2017, documenting some of the preferences for HIV prevention among MSM across the US. And the study consisted of a one-time internet survey. And what we see is that there were a fair number of individuals who preferred condoms and pills for HIV prevention, but there was also a significant number that reported preference for injections and implants, demonstrating, at least hypothetically, an openness to alternative HIV prevention strategies that could have a potential role, especially when we think about how difficult consistent condom use or taking a daily PrEP pill may be for certain groups of people. So the findings of some in-depth interviews from women in 3 African countries, I think South Africa, Zimbabwe, Uganda, to gauge their interest in various PrEP formulations and to see which methods they preferred and why. And these formulations were divided into 4 categories. So first, oral tablets. Second, vaginal gels. Third, injectables, implants, and vaginal rings. And then last, vaginal films and suppositories. And what they found was that 81% of the women expressed a preference for products in category 3, so injectables, implants, and vaginal rings, oftentimes citing things like duration of activity, ease of use, and route of administration as important factors that impacted their decision. In regards to oral PrEP, women stated things like taking a daily pill might be difficult because I might be away from the house or I might forget to take the medication. And it would really be great if I didn't have to take it unless I was actually going to do something. And then other women had concerns about their sexual partners and what they may think, simply stating things like, it might be easier if my partner couldn't see the medication or if they didn't know that it was there. And I think that's really important because it can come into play when you think about the idea of storing pills in one's home and the potential stigma that may come along with having HIV medications in your possession. And we certainly can't lose sight of the fact that even providers have preferences for the medications that they prescribe to their patients. And unfortunately, the decision about medical management isn't always a shared decision between provider and patient. A lot of times it ends up being the provider telling the patient what they want to prescribe, and the patient just kind of goes along with it. So it's important to understand that provider preferences also require consideration. Now, specifically with respect to long-acting ART as part of HIV treatment, but several of the points still apply for prevention. So the potential oral lead-in phase prior to starting the injections is something that many providers may not be comfortable with. Considerations about how well tolerated the medications may be, because once the medication has been administered, the idea is that it's going to be in your system for a while. How might these medications interact with other medications that the patient is currently taking? So these are all valid concerns and all things that might persuade providers to simply do what's easiest and most comfortable for them, which is just to prescribe oral PrEP. So the future of HIV prevention is extremely bright. There are a number of products that are currently under investigation from the preclinical phase to phase 4 studies, testing a number of active drugs by way of a number of delivery systems, including pills, vaginal gels, vaginal rings, vaginal films, enemas, intramuscular and subcutaneous injections, patches, and implants. So as I discuss each of these next few agents, it's important to keep in mind that ideally, the future of HIV PrEP will entail widespread availability of different products to afford individuals the opportunity to protect themselves against HIV in a manner that's conducive to their lifestyle, circumstances, and perceived risk factors. So in transitioning to some of these newer agents, first we have islatravir. So this is a nucleoside reverse transcriptase translocation inhibitor, or NRTTI. And as an NRTTI, it works through a number of different mechanisms of action. Intracellularly, islatravir is converted to its active form, islatravir triphosphate, which inhibits the HIV reverse transcriptase enzyme through incorporating itself into the viral DNA and blocking the translocation and preventing nucleotide attachment. In vitro, it seems like islatravir does not interact with the CYP enzymes, which could be important when we think about drug-drug interactions with other medications that patients may be taking. Now, some data from the recent islatravir phase 2 clinical trials that were performed. And I won't go into great detail, but in essence, it looked at HIV-negative individuals from 18 to 65 and used doses of islatravir at 60 milligrams, 120 milligrams, and compared those to placebo, with the primary endpoints being safety, tolerability, and pharmacokinetic data. The trough concentrations of islatravir triphosphate, or the active form, remained above the threshold for HIV prevention for at least 8 weeks following the last dose for both the 60 and the 120 milligram formulations of islatravir. Moving towards some of the current studies, so islatravir is currently under investigation in clinical trials for both HIV prevention and treatment. But because this is a talk about PrEP, I'll focus mainly on the prevention side of things. So there are currently 2 phase 3 clinical trials, Empower 22 and Empower 24, that are evaluating the efficacy and safety of oral islatravir as PrEP for individuals who are at high risk of HIV acquisition. Empower 22 focuses on cisgender women, and Empower 24 focuses on cisgender men and transgender women who have sex with men. In these trials, oral islatravir is being studied at a dose of 60 milligrams once a month, with TDF-FTC and TAF-FTC being its active comparators. So as you can imagine, a once-monthly pill might be particularly attractive for individuals who prefer less frequent dosing, but would like to remain on pills instead of other options that I'll discuss. I'll also mention that there was phase 1 clinical trial, which included islatravir implants at doses of 54 and 62 milligrams versus placebo that were placed in subjects for 12 weeks. Safety and tolerability were assessed throughout the trial, and pharmacokinetic data was collected. And essentially what it showed was that in both of these implants at either dose, the concentrations were well above the target for both implants throughout the study, suggesting at least that these islatravir-eluting implants could provide sufficient levels for HIV prophylaxis for at least 1 year. So the implant is a little bit earlier in development, but also promising and potentially useful for individuals who don't want to be restricted to oral formulations of HIV prevention. Now, moving on to other agents, is lenacapavir, and it's our next long-acting agent. So it belongs to a new HIV class, the capsid inhibitors. By targeting HIV capsid, lenacapavir interferes with multiple early to late stages in the process of the viral life cycle: capsid disassembly, nuclear transport, virus production, and capsid assembly. So there has been a phase 1 drug-drug interaction study that evaluated oral lenacapavir co-administered with other probe drugs, confirming that it is a substrate of the CYP3A enzyme pathway. But it sounds like also that when this lenacapavir was co-administered with strong CYP3A inhibitors, such as Dunavir cobicistat, the interactions were considered to not be clinically significant, and that lenacapavir could be co-administered with potent inhibitors without dose modification. Similar to islatravir, lenacapavir is also being developed with HIV treatment and prevention in mind. So with respect to HIV prevention clinical trials, currently a phase 3 clinical trial evaluating the safety and efficacy of twice yearly long-acting lenacapavir. Subcutaneous lenacapavir is being evaluated at a dose of 927 milligrams every 6 months, with oral lenacapavir 600 milligrams administered on days 1 and day 2. So again, another exciting option here, and one that may allow for twice yearly dosing of a medication, which could be tremendous, especially for individuals who struggle with daily adherence or prefer non-oral options. Next, we have rilpivirine. So anyone who's familiar with HIV treatment knows that this is not a new medication, but the formulation is a bit different. So first, rilpivirine is a non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor, and it's currently being evaluated as a sustained-release nanosuspension formulation delivered as a long-acting IM injection for PrEP. So there was a randomized double-blind phase 2 trial that evaluated doses of IM rilpivirine at 1,200 milligrams versus placebo in HIV uninfected sexually active women. And what the PK data demonstrated was that these levels of IM rilpivirine actually also remained above the 90% inhibitory concentration at 8 weeks post-injection. There was no significant difference in adverse events versus placebo, and there was a high rate of acceptability, suggesting at least that this could be a viable option for injectable PrEP in the future if it became available. So implants for prevention. So the idea of implants is that they can provide continuous and protective drug concentrations for a year or longer following a single implant, and that could revolutionize HIV PrEP treatment. So this isn't a concept that's unique to HIV prevention, and we have to look no further than implants as a means of contraception. Discrete devices like subdermal implants may eliminate some of the barriers for individuals who need HIV prevention medications, but cannot safely store the pills in their homes or be seen picking up medications in the clinic. Now, most of these products are at an early stage of development and have not yet been tested in humans. I previously discussed the clinical trials for islatravir and the results, but I also want to bring your attention to the TAF implants that yielded high tenofovir diphosphate levels in peripheral blood and protected all 6 macaques from vaginal simian HIV through 6 weeks of twice-weekly low-dose simian HIV challenges. The protection from simian HIV, however, came at the cost of marked deep dermal necrosis at 8 of the 12 implant sites. And I think that really underscores the importance of making sure that these medications and implants are safe. So while all these medications seem to be somewhere down the pipeline, the only one that has made its way to humans so far is the islatravir implant. And now, so as I shift my focus to policy and implementation, I just want to provide a few things to consider. So we cannot lose sight of the fact that in the same way that there are groups that are disproportionately impacted by HIV, there are groups that are very clearly lagging behind in regards to PrEP uptake, despite very clear needs. So we need to focus on ways to make sure that PrEP reaches those who need it just as much, if not more, than those who are taking advantage of PrEP on a regular basis. Because otherwise, the disparities that we currently see will continue to grow. When we think about uses of this long-acting PrEP, I can certainly see a potential in health departments, for instance, for use as direct observed therapy in the event of, say, concern for an emerging new HIV cluster. You bring individuals in, you test them, they're negative, you provide them with a long-acting injectable, and that provides them protection for several months. Just a thought. But with that being said, how does this actually work out logistically? How will long-acting PrEP impact clinic visits? Where will these medications be administered and by whom? What are the challenges of scheduling these visits? And how are we going to support these individuals' adherence with periodic injections? Where healthcare systems have the capacity to manage the potentially more frequent visits that may result, not necessarily from the need of the injection itself, but from potential side effects, because again, these are going to be long-acting agents. Will task shifting be necessary? For instance, will we have to get a larger role played by pharmacists, medical assistants, etc.? What will the real-world cost and consequence of these missed injections be? And we have to also think about how acceptable and tolerable these medications will be in the real world. Certainly, we have evidence of people's attitudes to these formulations, but intention and preference don't always translate into action. And we won't really know how well received these medications are how well they fit into people's lives until the medications are widely available. And at the end of it all, the key to successful implementation is going to be financing. So who's going to pay for all of this, and under what circumstances will the medications be covered? So lots of things that still need to be answered. And with that said, it's not enough to just have the tools at our disposal, but also to have the resources in place to make sure that these tools reach the people that need them most. Otherwise, we'll continue to fall short in our efforts to end the HIV epidemic. So as we think about the future, I do want to spend just a few moments discussing multi-purpose prevention technology, or MPTs. So MPTs are being designed to deliver multifaceted reproductive health prevention, largely focused on contraception and prevention of HIV. Now, to be clear, the idea of MPTs is not necessarily new. Condoms, by definition, serve multiple purposes: prevention of HIV and STI, as well as pregnancy. But I guess on this particular slide, I'm referring more so to novel ways to combine HIV prevention with contraception in the form of synthetic injectables, implants, and vaginal rings even, which could potentially have several possible benefits. So addressing overlapping risk factors for pregnancy and HIV acquisition, reducing unwanted pregnancy or HIV infection, reducing the cost of management of associated infections, and perhaps most importantly, reducing the stigma that's associated with the need to prevent HIV by incorporating those features into contraceptives, which are less stigmatizing. In summary, despite how effective daily oral PrEP can be in preventing HIV, a daily pill is simply not a strategy that works for everyone. So I think that what we need is, in the same way we have diversity in sort of consumer preferences for methods of HIV prevention, we need to have diversity in the HIV prevention strategies that we're able to offer to these patients. Convenience of the regimen, as I said before, is a major contributor to adherence, and oftentimes forgetting is one of the most common reasons that people give for missing medications. There is no shortage of long-acting products that are at various stages of development that are being evaluated for HIV prevention, with islatravir and lenacapavir both being currently in phase 3 clinical trials. Despite the promise that some of these new agents show, it's important to acknowledge and work to address many of the barriers that may threaten successful implementation, particularly as it relates to uptake of PrEP by the populations at highest risk for HIV infection. And finally, it's never easy or comfortable to talk about HIV prevention, but multi-purpose prevention technologies that provide simultaneous protection against multiple health concerns may help reduce stigma surrounding HIV by incorporating preventative features into less stigmatizing products like contraceptives. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing those insights, Dr. Chamberlain. And thanks to our listeners for joining in. As a reminder, to view the full educational program, Steps to the Future, Present and Future of PrEP, on the CCO website, click on the link in the show notes. Please be sure to check back regularly for more episodes on important infectious disease topics. Thank you.